I was trying to solve this terrible puzzle that confronted me and many other people about how it was that human beings got themselves in such a tangle about what they believed. Such a tangle that we were pointing the ultimate weapons of destruction at one another, which, by the way, we are still doing. And I thought, okay, well, I understand that. We need our belief systems. They orient us. And that means there will be conflict between belief systems, and that can be a catastrophe. And that's being played out everywhere, again, in very many ways. What's the solution to that? Well, one possibility is there's no solution. It's just mayhem all the way around. Could be the case. But it seemed to me, as I delved into it, that the proper solution to that was to live properly as an individual, because you're more powerful than you think. Way more powerful than you think. I mean, God only knows what you are in the final analysis. You're blind to your own weaknesses, but you're also blind to your own strengths. And so then I think, well, if you got your act together, it'd be better for you, and instantly it would be better for your family, assuming they wanted you to get your act together, and not everyone does, and then it would be better for the community. It's like, how far could you take that? If you stopped wasting time, and if you stopped lying, and if you oriented yourself to the highest possible good that you could conceive of, and you committed to that, how much good could you do? Well, I would say, why don't you find out? So that's what I think you should do. You should find out. You don't have anything better to do. And there's nothing in it, as far as I've been able to tell, there's nothing in it but good. So maybe you could sort yourself out so that you wanted nothing but the good. And then maybe you could help make that manifest in the world. And maybe we wouldn't have all these terrible problems then. At least we'd have fewer of them, and that would be a start. So it's the answer to the problem of humanity is the integrity of the individual. That's the answer. So, and states that are predicated on that realization are healthy. So, and states that aren't are doomed to stagnation and catastrophic collapse. And personalities that are predicated on self-tyranny and the tyranny of others are doomed to collapse. So, and then you think, well, what's the barrier? And the barrier is, are you willing to accept the responsibility? And part of the answer to that is, reduce the damn responsibility until it's tolerable. You don't have to fix everything at once. You could just start by fixing the things that you could fix. Or you could even do it more. You could do it with even less self-sacrifice. You could start by fixing only the things that you want to fix. God, you can get a massive way that way. So do it. See what happens. That's what you should have been taught in university right from the beginning. It's like, aim at the highest good. Tool yourself into something that can attain it. And go out there and manifest it in the world. And everything that comes your way will be a blessing. And so all you have to do is give up your resentment and your hatred. I know that's a hard thing to give up because you have plenty of reason for it. You see, the thing about disciplining someone, let's say, is that when you, and I see this very clearly when I'm talking to young people, is that I'm really on the side of the person that wants to do something positive with their life, to make their own life better, because I think that's where you should start. You should start by maximizing the quality of your own life. That's not a selfish thing, or if it is, it's the right kind of selfishness. And that you should figure out how to do that in a way that's of benefit to your friends and your family and your community, and you should take that deadly seriously. And the reason you should do that is because that just makes life better for everyone. And it reduces a fair bit of the misery that would otherwise be part and parcel of life, and it makes everything function smoothly. And one of the things I'm really curious about is what the world would be like if everybody decided to do that, because human beings are really remarkable creatures, and we hobble ourselves very badly with deception and resentment and revenge and the desire to make things worse and arrogance and all those sins, let's say, that that make us deviate from our true path. And our true path should be something like, imagine the noblest aim that you can conceptualize and then sacrifice your life to attempting to attain it. And there's nothing in that that isn't good for everyone. And so, apart from the fact that it requires a lot of responsibility, I just can't see why everyone wouldn't do that. And when I'm talking to young people and, shaking my finger and saying, grow the hell up and get mature and take on some responsibility, I'm not saying that because I'm an enemy of the person. I'm saying it because I'm the best friend of the part of them that would really like to walk in the light. And it's an invitation to walk in the light. And it would be remarkable. This is what we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, not only in the West, but in the world at large, but maybe in the West first, is we have to consciously decide that we're going to do everything we can as individuals to walk in the light, and to regard that as a noble and heroic endeavor, and to make that first and foremost in our lives. And that's what we should be educating young people to do, and they can do that. And so I have dozens of people writing to me and talking to me all the time who are saying the same thing. They're saying, look, I've really been trying to get my act together over the last 6 months. I've been trying not to lie, which is slightly different than trying to tell the truth, right? It's a more humble goal to not lie, because you can tell when you're lying, but you can't necessarily tell when you're telling the truth. And I've been coming up with a plan, and I've been trying to discipline myself, and I've been cleaning up my room, which is like a nice humble act that involves transforming chaos into order. And they write and say, God, things are just working out way better for me. It's like, whoa, do it, man. That's just, you keep that up for 15 years and you'll be unbeatable. And that's what we should be convincing young people to be, is to be unbeatable. And not because that's what they should do, or because they're bad if they don't, but because there's nothing better you can possibly do with your limited and suffering bound life than to aim high and sacrifice yourself to the attainment of those goals. So, do you have problems in your life that you're not addressing that you could solve? And the answer is yes. And it's an easy thing to figure out. You sit on your bed one morning and say, okay, there's some things that need to be done that I don't want to do, that I could do, that would make things better by the end of the day. What are they? Well, your conscience will deliver those suckers in no time flat, man. And then you might have to say, okay, well, how do I entice myself into doing a few of those? And if you ask, instead of trying to force yourself to do it like you're a tyrant and a slave at the same time, you can usually negotiate with yourself so that you'll start to sort those things out. Sort them out. Put your house in order. And then move out. Move on. And out. Yes. That's a Freudian slip, by the way. Yeah. So it's important, because the thing is, you have a practice domain, right? There are things that are within your grasp that you could fix. Fix them. And you'll learn, because it's harder than it looks. Fix them, and you'll learn how to fix things. And then something else will beckon as another problem that you could fix. You all have your problems. What does that mean? Like, there's an infinite number of problems in the world. Some of them happen to be yours. Why is that? I don't know exactly. But you have your problems. Great. Solve them. One of the things I learned as a therapist, every therapist has to learn this, is because one of the things you wonder when you're first starting to be a clinician is, how do you not take the catastrophes of your clients home with you? And the answer to that is because it's immoral to. They're not your problems. They're their problems. Like, they're their life. Your problems are your life. You don't want to solve someone else's problems for them, because you take away the deep meaning that's to be found in having them work through the problems on their own. And then you steal the credit. Well, I can help you with that. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but I don't help you with the next problem then. So in any case, you sort out the problems that are right in front of you, and it will make you grow very, very rapidly. And then you'll be able to sort out more complex problems without making them worse. How does it feel to be viewed as a father figure by many people who grew up without one? Well, I think it's an unbelievable honor. How's that? And that is really what I think. I think it's a tremendous honor, and I'm doing absolutely everything I can to be worthy of that. And I would like to say to all the people out there who grew up without a father, that's really too bad, because you need a father there to encourage you. That's what fathers do, is they encourage, they help make you courageous. And if I can help people develop the capacity to be courageous and to learn to tell the truth and to be responsible, then that's great. I can't imagine a better outcome for me. And so if people are willing to help me play that role and to use what I've been teaching to guide them in that manner, then hooray. I couldn't possibly imagine a better outcome than that. When you know you should do something. I mean, everyone has this experience, I believe. Perhaps you would be willing to put up your hands if this experience is foreign to you. Okay? There's part of you telling you you should do something, and it's hard to do it, effortful, and maybe you're afraid of it, and so you don't do it. You just procrastinate, right? And so how do you feel about that? Good? I mean, so what, you feel that you're betraying yourself. Your anxiety actually gets worse, not better, even though, you know, you can put it off moment to moment, but that doesn't help, because every time you put it off, the anxiety just grows a little bit. You're not proud of yourself. You have a sense that you're making things more chaotic than they should be. You know, and if you do that long enough, and I'm sure many of you have had that experience, if you do that long enough, if that becomes habitual, things will get so stormy around you that you'll fall right into the chaos, into the watery chaos, and maybe you'll drown. So it's not a very good idea to run from your destiny, let's say, whatever that might be. And you need a destiny, you need a place to aim at, because that's what gives your life meaning. And you need meaning in your life because life is hard. So, you know, you need something to buttress yourself against that. So anyways, they wake Jonah up, and Jonah says, it's probably my fault, because like I'm running away from something I'm supposed to do, and you know, God isn't very happy about that, so why don't you just throw me overboard? And the crew isn't very happy about that, but the waves are really starting to come up, and Jonah's pretty insistent that he's the cause of the problem. And so they draw lots, and Jonah is chosen, and so they decide to toss him into the ocean, and immediately everything's calm. So he's a center of chaos because he's not doing what he's supposed to do. Fine. Well, then a whale comes up and swallows him. And then he's in the whale for 3 days. That's a weird thing. The whale, that's the whale that Geppetto's in. That's a dragon. It's that thing that you have to go out there and conquer to get something of value. Now, when you've made an error, when you've fallen off the pathway, when you've deviated from what you know you should do, it produces a state of internal chaos and worry and concern. You're thrust into the unknown. You're thrust into unknown territory and chaos. You don't know what to do. And that's often symbolized by the encounter with a monster, like a dragon, or something that lives under the water. And I think the reason for that is, as far as I've been able to tell, is that human beings, because we've been prey animals for forever, we have a system in our mind that's a threat predator detection system. That's the thing that makes little kids think about monsters in the dark, right? Because, well, there is monsters in the dark. Parents always say, well, there's no monsters in the dark. It's like, that's not true. The dark is full of monsters. There might not be any in your room right at that moment, but that doesn't mean there aren't monsters in the dark. Crimes take place, like criminals don't get up at 6 in the morning and, like, you know, have breakfast and go rob a bank. They do that sort of thing at night. People do the things that are fit for the night in the night. And lots of predators are nocturnal, and you can't see very well in the dark. And kids aren't stupid, you know. They've evolved to stay pretty damn close to the fire. When you're feeling terrible, you don't say, well, I'm feeling up. You say, I'm feeling down. Well, why is that? Well, down is worse. I guess you're flat on the ground when you're down, or you're in a hole or something like that. You're hiding in a hole. You know, it's down. And you're threatened by something, you know. Maybe you're threatened by your own inadequacy. That might be part of it. Maybe that's partly what you imagine as a monstrous force, because, you know, your proclivity towards procrastination and your weakness of character is part and parcel of why you happen to be in the underworld. And that's the underworld, the mythological underworld. That's where you go when things fall apart. And if you understand that, if you know that that's what that means, then you have one of the keys that opens up ancient stories to you, and you understand things. Your life can be organized, going very well, and then something comes up, and poof, everything changes. Some axiom that you were living by, and it might be the existence of a partner, it might be a job, it might be your health, any of those things, gone. And you go somewhere when that happens. You go somewhere. It's a state of being. You're still in the same world, but it's not the same at all anymore. Everything about it is different. It's all negative and dark, and you don't know what to do. You're confused. And so, what do you do down there in the underworld when things have fallen apart? Especially if it's the worst possible case scenario and you realize that you actually had something to do with your demise. That's really annoying, you know, when something bad happens to you, and then, you know, you grind yourself into bits trying to figure out what the hell happened, and then you realize that, well, you were playing a causal role. Now, sometimes you're so depressed you assume you're playing a causal role, and you weren't. It's not easy to figure out by any stretch of the imagination. And it isn't that everyone who does something terrible is at fault for it, but sometimes you find that you were off the path somehow, and maybe even that you knew it and you didn't attend to it, and that's why all of this hit the fan. And so then down there in that chaos, you decide that you're going to do what you're supposed to do instead. And then maybe you get to rise up again, renewed, if you're lucky, and then you can go fix the city. And that's what this story's about. And that's why I picked the image to represent the course, because really what happens, you see, with the psychoanalysts, the road to health, if you're not doing well, which means that as you act in the world, you're not getting what you want. There's something wrong with the match between your presuppositions and your actions, habitual, and the way the world is responding to you. And so it's not turning out for you. And the question is, well, what can you do about that? And one answer might be to examine yourself for presuppositions and action patterns that are not serving you well, and to find out what they are and what to do about them. And maybe some of that is, maybe you're not moving forward because of fear, and maybe that fear is grounded in terrible experiences that you had in the past that you've never been able to understand. And maybe one of the ways of gluing yourself back together and expanding your personality so that you could in fact live properly in the world is to go back to those terrible events and untie them and straighten them out and understand them and drop them. And that's what psychotherapy is about in large part. Psychoanalytic, behavioral, doesn't matter. What are you afraid of? What are you avoiding? What are you failing to develop? Maybe from fear, maybe from avoidance, God only knows, maybe from disgust. How can you get over it? How can you reclaim those parts of yourself? So the question is, why do people pursue rewards that don't produce this resonance? They don't have a value hierarchy. So Pleasure Island, it's a good example. Those kids that were brought there were lost. So they didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have an identity. So they default to local pleasure. And that's better than none. Although the problem with local pleasure, well, as the narrative made clear, is that you better look out if you're impulsive, because it's going to kick back on you hard. And the reason is, you're only considering the immediate time frame. And the problem is that things propagate across all the time frames. And so just because something works really well this second, cocaine, for example, doesn't mean that it's a tenable solution to the class of all problems. So usually, often, people pursue local pleasure because that's the best they can imagine, it's the best they've been taught, they don't see another alternative. So it can be ignorance, it can be they don't want to adopt the responsibility, because part of the problem with working at every level of the hierarchy simultaneously is that it's like dancing to a very complex waltz, let's say. You have to be paying attention to a very large number of things simultaneously and doing things right. It requires responsibility. And so, you know, it's a pain. It's a weight. Part of the reason people drink alcohol is to get rid of their responsibility. I mean, that's, you know, you hear people drink because they have problems. It's like, yeah, no. Some people drink because they're anxious, and alcoholics drink because they're in withdrawal. But young people drink because they're sick and tired of being responsible, because it's annoying. It's like, so I'll drink enough, I won't care about the medium to long-term consequences, because alcohol, that's exactly what alcohol does. It doesn't make you ignorant of the medium to long-term consequences, but it makes you not care about them. And partly it's because it dampens anxiety. So it dampens anxiety, leaves your positive emotion circuits intact, so then you can go out there and do stupid fun things. And that's a party, really. Let's go do stupid fun things. You know, when you hear people like Joseph Campbell say things like follow your bliss, you know, and so that sounds pretty easy. You want to develop your personality, just do what you love. You know, it's a corruption of Carl Jung's thinking, because Jung would say, well, follow what you're interested in, it'll take you somewhere you really don't want to go, and then maybe you'll learn something. So, and that's a whole different proposition. So, human beings, if you talk about a human being, you tend to use something that's like a story. And when you recount your own being, you tend to use something like a story, and that sort of begs the question, you know, does that mean in fact that your experience is either a story or something like a story? One of the things Jung said, I really like this, is you should figure out which story you're living, because you're living a story, and it might be a tragedy. And so, you know, you want to find out, because if it's a tragedy, you don't come to a very good end. Another thing Jung said was, this is also worth thinking about, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. And so what Jung would say is that if you're living out a tragedy, the tragedy has you. You don't have it. And if you can figure out what the tragedy is that has you in its grip, then you have a fighting chance of escaping from it into a more pleasing plot. But it's no easy thing. You know, so if you're one of those people to whom the same terrible thing keeps happening over and over, after the third time, approximately, you might ask yourself, you know, is this the world or is this me? There's an absolute moral stance there, and everyone recognizes it. And I also think it's the key to success. And I would also say it's very much akin, in a strange way, like the person who is the master at being invited to play the largest possible number of games is also the same person. I haven't quite figured out the precise relationship between these two. Is also the same person that goes out forthrightly to conquer the unknown before it presents itself as the enemy at the door. They're the same thing. And it's a critique in some sense also of the idea of the patriarchy. I know, because the patriarchy is this dominant, oppressive hierarchy that everyone's embedded in. And, you know, the social constructionist, social justice warrior, postmodernist types think about that as a social construction. It's like, how about no? That's just wrong. Lobsters have hierarchies. That's 1/3 of a billion years ago. Okay, that's not a social construction. It's part of being itself. And if you only see a hierarchy as power and tyranny, then you're looking at the world wrong. Like, it's true that hierarchies can be tyrannical and dominant. Mm-hmm. And a degenerated hierarchy is nothing but tyranny. But in a functional society, the hierarchy is actually the structure of the society, and you're actually protected within it. Well, then how you relate to that hierarchy is very important, but that's part of personal development. That's part of standing upright, you know. And then people in the hierarchy think, oh, well, you're someone who could do good things for the hierarchy. Let's promote you. Yeah. You know, like, men don't struggle for power. That isn't what men do. Not if they're civilized. They size each other up and elect the competent to lead them. And they do that at every level of society. Like I tell a story in there about, might be later in another chapter, it doesn't matter. I worked in a rail crew in southern Saskatchewan. They're rough guys, like a lot of them had been in prison, you know. And when you first came onto the rail crew, you got a stupid nickname and people teased you. And I remember this one kid called Lunch Bucket. That was his nickname because he came to the rail crew with a lunch bucket that looked like his mom had packed it. That was a bad idea. You bring your damn lunch in kind of a, you know, ratty paper bag.
Right.
You don't make too big a thing out of it.
And it's dirty and smelly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like you're not pronouncing your status with your lunch bucket.
You don't have a Barbie lunchbox.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
So they named him Lunch Bucket, which he wasn't very happy about.
Yeah.
Well, that was a mistake. He should have taken it with a smile. And then he was always peevish and irritable. And if you asked him to do something, he'd whine. And so, like, this was soon after I joined the rail crew. Well, soon, there's about 60 men on this crew. It stretched out about a quarter of a mile down the tracks. Soon, anonymous harassers were throwing pebbles at him during work. We had hard hats on, so the game was, let's see if we can hit a lunch bucket in the hard hat with a pebble. Because
Anonymous.
Yeah, well, because you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And that was purposeful because he couldn't take a joke. It's like, well, let's see if he can take this joke. Clunk, and everybody go, you know. And then he just got more and more peevish, and the pebbles got bigger and bigger. And, you know, a week later, Lunch Bucket was gone, having not learned anything from the experience. But, you know, the men were testing him out. It's like, can you take a joke? Can you be useful? Can you at least be amusing? Like, is there something worthwhile about you? It's like, no. It's like, okay, well then you're out of here, because you never know when we actually might need to depend on you.
Nicknames that are in the SEAL teams, like I can't with good conscience repeat them.
I'm sure that's
because
true.
they're just horrible names. Yeah. But there's a camaraderie around that, and there's also as I was reading what you had written about these guys working on a railway
crew. Yeah.
There's a test. It's a test.
Yeah.
It's a test to see where you're at.
That's
what
right.
you're made of.
That's right. Can we rely on you? Can you tolerate a little bit of irritation? If the answer to that is no, it's like, well, maybe we don't want you around then, because some irritating things are likely to come down the pipe.
Yeah, and it's not just to me it proves if you've got someone that can take it, right? It's not just that they can take some random joking insults. Like they can take it. They can take it.
Yeah, that's what you're testing for. It's like, can you take it? Lunch Bucket couldn't, right? Because people would laugh at his lunch bucket and he'd get all upset. It's like, well, you have a stupid lunch bucket. It's like, you know, your mom packed it. How about it? You laugh at yourself. Yeah, my mom packed this. I know it's kind of stupid. That would have been the end of it. He would have just had to say that.
Yeah.
It's like, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. It's like, oh, okay, you know, fine. You got your stupid lunch bucket. But no, he couldn't handle that. You know, so yeah, it was horrible and comical to watch at the same time, because the level of, and people have written me about that, and they said, oh, you know, poor lunch bucket. It's like, because they're all compassionate. I think, no, not poor lunch bucket. It's like, clue the hell in, buddy. You had your chance. You know, that was a desirable job, that rail crew job in the summer, because it was high paying, you know, and they weren't easy to come by, those jobs. And so the fact that he got hired onto that crew was a real opportunity for him. You could make a pile of money in the summer at working on the rail crew. And all you had to do was take some ribbing with good grace, not suck up to the management too badly, and not have other people do your job. That was all. That was all you had to do. But he couldn't do that, and so he got run off. And it was like, grow the hell up, buddy. You know, these guys, when 100 people are teasing you, then probably they're not wrong.
Yeah, when you are getting teased like that as well, when you stop reacting, it's no longer fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, it also gives you an opportunity to tease back. It's like, because you can show your wit. And one of the things that working class guys in particular, which is one of the things I really loved about working class jobs, is they're always looking for some humor. So it's like, if person A is teasing person B, that's kind of comical. But if person B comes back with a good comeback, it's like, that's even better, you know? So I think that's a lot of how those jobs are rendered tolerable, right? They're hard, dirty jobs.
Right.
Dishwasher's a good example. That's not dangerous. Although cooking is, you know, you got to watch your step. I got burned a lot when I was cooking. But what makes those jobs not only tolerable, but even desirable, is that you can develop a tremendous amount of camaraderie around them. I've never really experienced that at a professional level job. That just doesn't happen the same way. And there's a real loss in that. So it's fun to be part of a team that's doing, grubby, hands-on things and having a ridiculously entertaining, vicious, cruel, and evil time while you're doing it. That's very entertaining.